Hi everyone, Samantha Hildebrandt here with Type 1 Tribe. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about multiple daily injections and why you should consider this method for giving yourself insulin. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on February 18th of 2021, and I have been on multiple daily injections ever since. So I have never been on a pump, but I am a huge fan of MDI, and I want to dive into what MDI is, how it works, why you should consider it as an option instead of a pump, and how it is beneficial to your type 1 diabetes. So, multiple daily injections, or you'll hear some people say MDI, or some other people may say they use insulin pens. That is all multiple daily injections. And basically, what that means is if you are on multiple daily injections, you are giving yourself a shot of insulin every single day, multiple times a day, to give yourself that insulin that we need as type 1 diabetics. I was put on MDI immediately when I was first diagnosed. And the thought of getting on a pump has been brought up. I've discussed it with my endocrinologist, but I personally love multiple daily injections. I think it's the best method for me right now in my life. I might change my mind down the road, but I think for now, I personally love being on MDI. So when you're on MDI or an insulin pen, it works a little bit differently than if you were on a pump. So with multiple daily injections, and I'm sorry, I'll be using that term, interchangeably, MDI, pens, multiple daily injections. When I say that, I mean the same thing. So with MDI, you take a long-lasting insulin in the morning or at night, and then you will take your fast-acting insulin throughout the day before you eat your food or for other instances, but we'll just stick with eating for food right now. So the long-lasting insulin is typically an insulin that lasts 24 to 28 hours long. So you only have to take it once per day. I know a lot of people take it at nighttime before bed, but I actually take mine in the morning at 7 a.m. every single day, and I use Tresiba. There are several different types of brands out there that you can use for your long lasting. Some are better than others for different reasons, but for me, Tresiba works the best, and I personally like taking it in the morning at 7 a.m. I think it's easier because I'm always home at that time. I can always, take it right at 7 a.m. Honestly, my endocrinologist put me on a morning Tresiba insulin shot. So I've been doing that ever since diagnosis. So I've never done the nighttime one. I've never, seen the different effects that would have on me. But I do see a positive effect for taking my long lasting shot in the morning. And then for food, we take a different type of insulin, which is a fast acting insulin. And this is typically one that will start working in 15 to 30 minutes, which is why we take it before food, because it can quickly get into our system. And I do that all through insulin pens. And so I have mine here, which I will show you. If you're listening on the podcast, you can also watch now on Spotify. I currently use Humalog as my fast acting insulin, and I use insulin pens. So when I am taking insulin for my food during the day, I try to take it about 10 to 15 minutes early before I start eating because Humalog actually takes about 15, 20 minutes to kick in. And if you're a type 1 diabetic, you know all this because we've all took insulin and then started eating immediately. And then, of course, our blood sugar goes through the roof because the insulin hasn't had time to kick in yet. And so when people that live with type 1 diabetes say like, hey, you should pre-bolus, or your endocrinologist says, hey, you should pre-bolus, they're not joking. You should. Your blood sugar will do magically better if you actually follow that 10, 15, 20-minute rule. Of course, it kind of depends what you're eating. If you're eating something that's high sugar, I definitely recommend waiting the 15, 20 minutes. If you're eating something that's maybe a food that might not hit you until several hours later, that's probably a food that you could start eating immediately, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Really, I just wanted to talk about multiple daily injections. So I take a lot of shots every single day. Thankfully, I don't mind needles. I've never really been one of those people that has issues with needles. And I know there's a lot of you out there, a lot of type 1 diabetics have issues with needles, which is very unfortunate. And that's why pumps can be a good option for people like that because, you only have to do the pump insertion every 3 days, where I have to take honestly a minimum of 4 insulin shots per day up to 8. I mean, it really just depends. I mean, it could be 10, it could be 12. It really just depends. I mean, I don't try to take that many. I try to keep it to 4 to 5 insulin shots per day, but I will take more if I have to. I'm not afraid to poke myself with a needle. I do it all the time now. I've done it quite a lot over the past 4 years. So I just put my needle on my MDI pen and I insert it into my arm, I insert it into my stomach, into my leg. You'll also notice that when you are in MDI, I'm going to put this back on so I don't stab myself with the needle. On MDI, certain parts of your body will work better than other parts for insulin insertion. So the experts, for example, say that if you were to insert a needle into a muscle, the insulin will actually kick in faster than if you were to insert it into fat. There will be faster absorption in the body. Now, I don't know if I noticed that too much, but that's also great to know. If you're ever really, really high and you need your insulin to kick in faster, like you might as well try the muscle. The other really cool thing about getting to choose where we insert the needles is that if you exercise that muscle after inserting it, the insulin will also kick in faster. So I could, for example, insert it into my bicep, and then I could go down to the garage and start doing bicep curls. And that would have a better effect, or the insulin would absorb better if I did that. Now, a lot of times I'm not honestly even thinking about that. I just kind of will put my insulin pen in the needle wherever I can, wherever I have bare skin usually. I do love the back of my arms, which you could actually tell here. I have bruises on the back of my arms from the needles. I do love that because fat, it doesn't hurt as bad either. So when you're inserting a needle, fat is a good place to put it just because it's not going to be as painful. So yes, I bruise pretty easily, but these don't hurt me typically. Stomach is a really good spot, especially if you have, a little bit of extra fat there. That's great for inserting a needle for your insulin. And then the thigh also is great. But here's the thing about the thigh, and I don't know if it's just me or if this is a common thing, but when I insert insulin into my thigh, it actually takes a bit longer to work. And I don't really know why that's the case, but I do usually keep that in mind because if I need my insulin to kick in faster, I'm not going to put it in my thigh because that will seem to take longer for me. So these are just little things that you learn over time when you are a type 1 diabetic, right? Because you're like, hey, today I'm going to put it in my thigh. And then maybe it takes 30 minutes instead of 15. You're like, okay, like I'm going to remember that for next time that it takes a little bit longer. Arms tend to go pretty fast for me, and so does the stomach. But then of course there's places you're not supposed to put it, like your face. Obviously, you don't want to put a needle in your face. You don't put it in your butt. Younger kids, I believe, can put an insulin pen at the top of their butt, but don't quote me on that. I know I'm not supposed to. You're not supposed to put it in your calf, your feet, any of that. We kind of stick to, the arms, the stomach, and the upper outer thigh area. And that is where you can, put your insulin needles. So I get a lot of questions as to why I am still on MDI. And yes, a lot of my friends that have type 1 diabetes always word it that way. Like, why are you still on MDI, Samantha? Like, why haven't you switched to a pump? Like, why haven't you considered a pump? And they always ask me these questions. And they're very fair and valid questions. Most of these people are on pumps and they love their pump. So they're like, Samantha, what are you doing? Why are you still on MDI? And so I wanted to talk about that today because I love MDI. And sometimes I actually feel a little judged for still being on MDI, which I think is interesting. I don't know if it's judgment from other people or if maybe they just love their pumps so much they don't understand why I would want to stick myself with a needle 4 to 5 to 6 times a day. which once again is very, very fair. It's a very fair and valid statement and question. However, I love MDI. So let me backtrack a little bit. When I was pregnant or about to get pregnant, I was talking to my endocrinologist about this, and she was kind of pushing a pump on me. She just kind of explained to me that, when you're pregnant, you do experience a lot of insulin resistance, and you're going to be having to give yourself a lot more insulin than you typically are used to. And you might want to be on a pump because then you don't have to be poking yourself 10 to 15 times a day. And also, the benefits of pumps is it's kind of working for you in the background where MDI is not. So she was really pushing the pump on me, just recommending it, thinking, it would be a good option, specifically Tandem, because Tandem is amazing. And I've heard amazing things about Tandem and how it works for you. However, it wasn't sitting right with me. I didn't want to get off MDI. I love it that much. I have been on MDI since diagnosis. And so I was on MDI all through pregnancy, and I maintained an A1C under 6. So I want to say that because I want to say it's possible. You don't have to be on a pump to maintain a blood sugar and an A1C under that 6%. It's definitely doable. But I do want to be honest, and one of the main reasons I love MDI is because I know how to handle it, I know how to use it, and I'm able to get an A1C under 6. And so I think it would be different if I had an A1C above 6 or 7. And if I was struggling with my MDI, the management of it all, I would probably switch to a pump. But to be honest, I do pretty well on MDI. I have only had an A1C over 6 one time since diagnosis. And so I feel very comfortable with MDI. And I know now, like, how much to give myself for certain foods. And I mean, I'm still learning every day. I mean, there's plenty of foods where I'm like, what just happened? And, of course, but I feel very comfortable with MDI. So I know what I'm doing, and I don't think it's necessary to switch. It's almost like the comment of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'm not necessarily saying that a pump wouldn't be better, because maybe it would be, but I love MDI. I'm comfortable on it. But the other benefit of MDI is, well, there's a couple, but the first one I think is that I can just throw this in some needles in my purse and be good. And that's where my insulin is. So I don't have to wear something on my body. I already wear a Dexcom, and that's enough for me personally. Now, if you wear a pump and a Dexcom and anything else, that's great. I love that. I think that's amazing. But I personally don't want to. I think, wearing a Dexcom is enough for me right now in this stage of my life, because I do fine on MDI. So going back to what I said before, if I had like crazy blood sugars, I think that would be a different story. But I do completely fine. And so I'm like, well, I don't need to wear another thing on my body. I just don't need to. I'm doing fine. And so I really like that, to be honest. I like that I'm not attached to another device. I'm already attached to a Dexcom. I don't need another one. And that's just the way I look at it. Once again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing if you are on a pump. I think it's great. And I think it's necessary for some people, especially for like kids. I mean, you don't want to be giving a kid an insulin shot. Like, that's just going to be tough. So I think there's definitely instances when like a pump is necessary. Just for me, I don't think it is at this point in my life. So I personally love that I can just throw my insulin pen, my needles in this bag and just throw it in my purse, and I'm good to go. Now, there is a negative to this, of course, and that is if you forget your insulin pen, you're screwed. Thankfully, I have never forgotten my insulin pen, knock on wood, for like a dinner or anything. However, there is one story that I have. My husband and I went to a Mexican restaurant, and I actually knew that my insulin pen was maybe had like one unit left in it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to grab another one. So I was actually prepared, which is funny. I went and grabbed another insulin pen. So I had two in this bag. We go to the Mexican restaurant. We sit down, and I open my one pen that had one unit, and I gave myself the shot, and I was like, okay, I'm going to open the other one, the fresh one that I just brought. Well, apparently that one was old as well, and it had no units in it. So I had two pens with basically no units, and I was like, oh no, like, what do I do? I literally can't eat this meal. I literally can't eat this meal because I didn't have a pen on me with insulin in it. And so I think I got like a salad, or and like no dressing or something. I don't even remember what I did, but that was the first scary moment I think I've had with multiple daily injections and being like, oh my gosh, I can't eat. And that's such a scary feeling. Obviously, my husband and I could have left. I mean, there's so many things we could have done. It's not like, you know, there's things, but that's such a terrible feeling when, like, once again, everyone else just goes to a restaurant, they can just eat, not think about it, where I have to take an insulin shot and hopefully have insulin in the pen. So that is a negative with MDI, but once again, I'm pretty prepared. That's happened to me once over the past 4 years, and technically I was over prepared. I had two pens. I just didn't check the pens to make sure there was insulin inside, which now I will every time I do that. So maybe it was a good thing that it happened because now I'm going to look and make sure the pen I'm bringing has insulin inside. So sometimes those things are necessary because then, I'm not going to forget to do that ever again. But there are, of course, negatives to MDI, but I still love the fact that I can just throw my pen in my purse and be done with it and not have to wear anything else on my body. The other thing that I personally love about MDI is when I have to travel, when you have to go on a plane, when you're going somewhere far and you have to, maybe for a long time and you have to pack. Well, being on multiple daily injections is amazing because I have to bring like 3 pens and that's it, and a bunch of needles. But like, I don't have to bring all of my pod supplies or anything like that. I don't have to have all this other technology devices that I have to bring to like worry about changing my pump through every 3 days and all of that. Like all I have to do is bring 1 to 3 pens and be good. So I love that. It's easy to pack. It's easy to keep cold, honestly, too. I know that can be an issue. There's a lot of cool tools and packages and containers now that can help keep your insulin pen cool so you don't have to worry about it getting too hot. And so I just personally think MDI is so good for me in my lifestyle right now. The third reason is honestly that I have a child, and MDI actually is amazing for when you have a kid. Some people may disagree with me, but I always think about Tandem as a comparison. Tandem has a tube. I do not want my child pulling out my insulin tube. Okay. That would not be good. If she pulled that out, that would not be fun. So I like MDI. One thing you have to do, of course, be careful of though, is there are needles everywhere around me at all times. And so you have to make sure that your child is not grabbing the needles, which can get scary, but thankfully they are honestly pretty protected in here, but you still have to be cautious of that. But I wouldn't want to be on Tandem personally at this stage in my life because I don't need that. Now I know there's like Omnipod and there's a bunch of other ones that you can do that don't have wires, but I still think I'm like, if I'm sitting next to her, she could be pulling at it and I just don't want to deal with that right now. So MDI is great for me at this point in my life. Now, this last benefit may stir some feathers here, and it may not be a benefit for everybody, but for me it is. I don't always want to talk about my diabetes. If I am going somewhere new and I'm meeting a bunch of new people, I do not want to talk about diabetes. Now, I'm not afraid to talk about it. So if somebody comes up and asks me a question, I will be happy to answer it. But I don't want to always be talking about it at like a new event because I'm more than my diabetes, right? Like I don't want to be talking about why I'm wearing a pump. I don't want to be talking about why I have a Dexcom. I don't want to talk about any of that. Like I just want to be a quote unquote normal person at these events. And I don't want to have to be constantly explaining myself. And so I don't necessarily think that you should hide your diabetes at all. I definitely don't. I mean, I'm the type of person that whips out a needle in a restaurant and I'll just take it in front of everybody. I don't care. But I don't necessarily want to go to an event and like immediately stand out with an insulin pump. And that's totally cool if you are fine with that. I'm actually more impressed. I think it's great that you can do that because I would say I'm still not very comfortable with it. And for example, went to a wedding last night and I'm just thinking of the situation where if I was wearing a pump, let's say an Omnipod on my arm, everyone would be like, Samantha, what's that on your arm? What does that do? And sometimes I just don't want to talk about it. Sometimes I just want to go to a wedding and enjoy myself and not talk about diabetes. I think about diabetes all the time. Like I do not need to be also talking about it with every single new person that I meet. So no, I don't think you need to hide your diabetes. I just think sometimes MDI is great in that instance because I can go to a wedding, wear a dress, and not have to like be so obvious that I have type 1 diabetes. And It was nice because I didn't have to talk about it. I actually last night at the wedding went low a couple times and I had to go away and I had to sit down and eat sugar. And so don't get me wrong, my diabetes was still there, but I didn't have to explain myself to every single person I saw of like, what is that on your arm, Samantha? Why are you wearing that? What does that do? And I just didn't want to get into it. Sometimes I just want to go to a wedding and have fun and dance. And so I think that's another benefit personally of MDI. But I do want to say, like, if you're the person that wears a pump publicly, I also applaud you. I think that's amazing because I would like to get there someday in my life. But I also think sometimes it's okay if you just want to not talk about it. So overall, I absolutely love multiple daily injections. Will I be on MDI my whole life? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. Maybe one day I'll want to try out a pump. Maybe one day there will be a cure. We can hope, you guys. We can hope. Who knows? Okay, I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but I personally, at this stage of my life, and so far in my diabetes history and my diabetes experiences, I love multiple daily injections. And if you're on a pump and you're like, I could really use a pump break, I highly encourage you to try MDI. If you don't like it, you can go back on a pump. Okay. Like there's no rules here. We can all do whatever we want. We can all do whatever we think we are most comfortable with. We can all make our own diabetes decisions, which is pretty awesome, actually, that we have so many options and that we can live a life the way we want to with our diabetes. So multiple daily injections is a great way to manage your diabetes and manage the insulin that's going into our bodies. It's a great way. So are all of the pumps. So whatever works best for you is amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. I love you all, and I will see you next week. Bye. Popping in here really fast to talk about what you do with your needles when you're done using them. If you are taking 4 to 6 insulin shots per day, that means you are getting rid of 4 to 6 needles. Now, if you're like me, or if you were anything like me, I used to throw my needles straight in the trash. Why? Well, that was pretty much just the easy option. I didn't want to have to go through the hassle of finding a safe way to dispose of them. Well, guess what? There is now a company called PureWay, and they provide type 1 diabetics who are on multiple daily injections, or really anyone who uses needles, these awesome red disposable containers for all of our needles. So yes, you don't have to throw it in the trash anymore. You can throw it in this container. And the coolest part is you can send the container back to PureWay for free, by the way. They give you a free shipping label and they will dispose of them safely for you. I mean, how freaking cool is that? So this company, PureWay here, you should go check them out because don't be like me and don't throw them in the trash like I used to. Now I just keep this in my kitchen where I tend to use most of my needles. I will just toss my needles in here when I'm done with them, and then I will ship the container back to PureWay so they can dispose of them safely, and it's environmentally friendly. So go check them out. Go to store.pureway.com to shop your container and use code type1tribe12 for 12% off your first container.